recording, and let's move this down here. Okay, so we're just talking about color. There's a lot that we can do with color in P5, so we're just going to introduce a few different approaches, but we're not going to cover everything that you can do. We'll continue to look at how to use color in different projects throughout the semester, but we're just going to look at how do we add some basic colors and the differences between the different color functions. So we're going to start with the basic color functions, stroke and fill. If you've used Illustrator or any vector-based drawing software before, you will be familiar with the terms stroke and fill. And they're pretty straightforward. You can see with the shapes that we have already, you can see that the inside of each shape is white, and the outside of the shape, or the stroke, is black. So that's the stroke and the fill. And what we're looking at before we change anything is the defaults. So the default fill is white, and the default stroke is black. So I can change these by using the stroke and fill functions. So I'll just start with fill. So I'll say fill, and let's start with blue. And this is just one way of writing a color, is using an HTML color value. So if you've done MMP 100, you've seen this before, and we can Google it real quick. We can say HTML color codes. Let's do that one. And this is a useful site because it shows you the hex value, the RGB value, and the HSL value for any color that you're looking at. And then you can also go to the names and look at HTML color names. Oh, it looks like it also has Minecraft. That might be a new thing. I haven't noticed that before. Anyway, we want HTML because we're working on the web. And so we can look at colors. If we want to look for a blue color, we can look at the different colors, and it'll show us the HTML names, which we can use in our code. But it also shows us the hex values, which we can also use, as well as the RGB values, which are actually going to be a little bit more useful, and we'll see why pretty soon. So I might want to choose a different blue than just default blue. There's a bunch of nice blues here. I kind of like this cornflower blue, so I could copy that and go back here and paste it in here. And if I hit play, you'll see that that blue fill gets applied to all of the shapes in my drawing. So a couple things real quick. Notice that the name of the color has quotation marks around it. So that's because it's a string value. So remember we talked about data types, numbers, and strings, and booleans. This is a string value, which is a sequence of letters. And if we don't have quotation marks, we're going to get an error here. It's going to say undefined. So you can see in our console down here, it pops up when we get an error. And it says cornflower blue is not defined. So we'll talk about this more next week. But what that basically means is it thinks that this is what's called a variable. And we haven't made a variable named cornflower blue, so it doesn't know what's going on. So we need to put quotation marks. You can use single or double quotes. It doesn't matter as long as they match. So if I do 2 double quotation marks, it'll work. If I, by mistake, put a single quote after a double quote, then I'm going to get an error. So invalid or unexpected token. So I just have to match the quotation marks. And I can add a color to my drawing. So one thing to go over is that this fill applies to all the shapes that come after the fill. So if I move the fill, for example, if I cut, and let's say I move after the face, and I paste here. Oh, whoops. This actually doesn't change anything because we're using the draw loop. So let's say I add in a fill that's white here, so that's the default. So now the face is white because the face shape here comes after fill is white, and then everything else below the face is blue because we've changed the fill to blue. And so we've talked about thinking about our code as a sketch, and we can continue to think about it here. If you were making a sketch, and let's say you had, you know, a box of colored pencils, and you picked out the blue colored pencil and you drew some shapes, they would all be blue, right? And then if you wanted to change the color, you'd put the blue pencil back and you'd take out a different color and you'd start drawing, and everything that came out after you take out that new pencil is going to be in that color. So when we say fill is blue, we're basically taking out our blue pencil, and everything that we draw afterwards is going to have that color. So let's add some more colors. Well, we can leave that for a second. So if we wanted there not to be a fill for one of our shapes, there's a specific way to do that, which is to say no fill. And this is another function, but it doesn't have an argument because we're just saying that we don't need a fill. And so if I say that, now my face doesn't have a color. It's just a stroke. It's just the outline. Okay, so let's look at the stroke. So the default stroke is black. So if I say stroke is black, this isn't going to change anything. But there is also a value called the stroke weight, which is how thick or wide the stroke is. So if I say stroke weight and I set it to a different number, the default is 1. If I say it's like 2, now I get wider lines in my drawing, which you can use you know, for different effects. If we do like really wide lines, now we get this, you know, these big chunky strokes. So that could be useful at different points. I'm going to set this back to 2 for a second. We could also do no stroke. So I did no fill for the face, and I could come down to my eyes, and let's say I wanted the eyes to stay blue, but I don't want the outline. I could say no stroke. And this is going to make some of our things disappear, like our hair, because we're saying no stroke, and then everything that we draw after this is not having a stroke. So if we wanted our hair to have a stroke, we could find our lines and we could set the stroke. So we could say the hair, let's say we want it to be green. We can set a new color. And now we can see the hair is green. It's pretty, the lines are pretty thin, so let's actually make the hair a bit thicker. Let's say stroke weight is like 8. So now we have some green hair, but now you can see we are getting this stroke on our mask at the bottom, which you may or may not want for this triangle. So for our mask, you know, most masks are, I guess masks are a lot of different colors. My mask is white, so I'll do a white triangle for my mask. And I actually don't have a comment here on what this is, so let's put mask here. And then we can turn off the stroke. I don't really need a stroke for this, so I'll say no stroke. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then we might want to change some of the other components of our shape. So, you know, we might say we want our ears to just have a stroke like the face. So I could set these down here, or I could just move these guys back up. Like I could cut these and put them right under the face. So it doesn't really matter. There's multiple ways to do most things. I'm just changing the order of the shapes this time instead of the colors. And then we might want a different setup for the mouth. So maybe for the mouth, we can say we could say no fill, and the stroke is let's say green to match the hair. So we can have a couple different green things. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then now you can see I've got the same thing for my hair that I have for my mouth. They're both stroke green, so I don't actually need this one anymore, right? If I'm changing the color to green, I don't need to do it twice. I can, there's nothing wrong with doing it twice, but if I want to, I can take that out. And now the mouth and the hair are using the same thing. I could also just move this stroke weight up if I want to. And so that way I don't have to repeat myself. We're not super worried about that right now since we're just learning how this stuff works. But eventually, when we have a lot more code, we're gonna want to be careful not to have to repeat our code when it's not necessary. So we'll talk about ways to avoid that. So this is pretty good. Trying to see. Actually, let's go back to our notes and see where we are. Okay, so we looked at some named values, which come from HTML. We looked at no stroke and no fill, so we know what those do. We looked at stroke weight. Okay, so let's talk about hex values. You guys are probably familiar with hex values from doing MMP 100 and maybe some other web design classes. But you can see all of our HTML colors also have a hex value. And if you look at certain hex values, you can actually kind of see how they're similar to RGB. So RGB, for just a quick reminder, is red, green, and blue, right? So on the computer, we can make different colors by mixing different amounts of red, green, and blue. And that's actually what we're doing with our other color values. Our hex code and our name is just pointing to an RGB value. So with our hex code, if you look at the hex code and then look at the RGB value, you might notice something similar. For this blue color, aqua, the RGB is 0, and the first two values in the hex code are 0, 0. So a hex is actually just a 2 decimal or 2 number way or 2 character way of representing a value from 0 to 255. So it's basically making a smaller version of our RGB value. So our RGB value requires, for this one, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different digits to express the value, and it could require up to 9, but it might be also as small as 3. And so that's okay because we can do math and understand numbers. That's a good question. I guess it just has 2 different names. Yeah. It looks like there's just 2 different names that point to the same color. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that before. But they do look similar, like this code and this color are the same, so that makes sense. So with hex, the reason there's a little bit of an advantage over expressing RGB because we always know there's going to be 6 characters. So it makes it easy for us to have certain expectations as far as doing math or transmitting data. With the hex value, though, in order to express more numbers, we need to add some letters. So hex doesn't go from 0 to 9. It actually goes from 0 to 9, and then it adds A, B, C, D, E, F to the end of that. So each of these characters in a hex value can actually represent 16 different values instead of just 10. So it's sort of like a different counting system. But what you can notice is that where it says 0 for RGB, it says 0, 0 for hex. And where it says 255 for RGB, it says FF for hex. So FF is the 2 highest possible values. And what it really represents is 16 times 16, which gives us 256, which is what 0 to 255 that's the same range. So that's all that a hex value is. It's just a simplified way of expressing a large number. And so you can see with some of these values, it's kind of harder to see, like, this one here, like 40E0D0, like what does that mean? But we can see with something, like this one, where red is 0, we can see that 0, 0 is the same thing. It's not really important to understand that, but it might be interesting to know why. But anyway, we can use hex values, just like we can use our named colors. So if I wanted to use aqua or cyan, I could refer to it as aqua or cyan, or I could grab this hex code and copy it and go back to my sketch. And let's say if I wanted to change the color of my mask, I can paste that in here. And now we have a new color for our mask. If I take the quotation marks out, I'm going to get the exact same issue because the hex value in P5 is also just a string, unlike CSS. So I'm going to get an error there. So if I'm using an HTML, or if I'm using a CSS hex value, I need to have the strings there. So what I can also do, let's see if there's anything else on hex values. Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So I can also express express colors using numbers. So let's scroll back up for a second, and remember we have this background, and the value here is 220. So that doesn't look like a color, and it doesn't look like a hex value, right? But it does represent the gray background. And if I make this value like 0, it's going to be black. And if I make it like 255, it's going to be white. And if I do like something in the middle, like 127, which is halfway, it's going to be gray. So we can express grayscale colors with one number from 0 to 255. So let's turn this back to 220. I can also express RGB values that way, which is going to be a lot more useful in the future. So if we go back to our aqua, I remember the RGB value. I can just put those in as numbers. I don't need a string for that. So I know it's 0 for red, 255 for green, and 255 for blue. And so the color doesn't change when I put that in there. There's also, if I want, I can add a fourth value, which is alpha. So if I wanted my mask to be a little bit see-through, I could do like 127. So it'd be like half transparent. And so now you can see the lines behind the mask. So we're going to use more RGB colors this semester because we can use math and programming to do cool animations and different things with our sketches. We won't worry about it too much right now, but something that you might want to use it for, like if you were making like a gradient or something like that, you can use a fill and you could add to it. So let's say, we had, let's just put this up here. And let's say for some reason I wanted to add a second layer to my mask. I'll just copy and paste this. But I want to change the color slightly. So I'll say, instead of 0, I'll say 0 plus 100. And obviously adding 0 to 100 is just 100, so we can paste that. And let's move everything down a little bit. So let's just add 350. Or let's leave 300 and do 4 and do 3, do 3. Oh, that was a little too far. What did I have? Okay, let's do 350 and 225, 225. Okay, so that looks kind of weird, but you can see we have some like different color values and different blending. I could also like subtract some color from green if I wanted to get a different color, or subtract from blue. I can't go over 255 with any of my colors, so I can make some changes using math that way. So we'll do more stuff like that as we get to more familiar with P5. I'm gonna get rid of that for now. Okay. Transparency we discussed. Oh, and I think that's it. Let's take a look. Okay. So that's everything I want to talk about with color. I don't think there's anything else we need to discuss for now. We're going to go over some stuff on Wednesday about exporting and publishing our work. So I'm going to stop the recording.